Welcome to Storytime with Pops, where every quiet story carries a hidden truth. Here, we uncover the pain of betrayal, the cost of greed, and the moment justice finally comes home. So sit back, listen close, and let Pops tell you a story you won't forget. My sister took Pops' lake house while he was recovering, then told everyone I was greedy for asking questions. She thought the deed was already hers. But tied to the old boat lift, Pops had one camera still watching the dock. The lake house gate had never been locked against me before. It had stuck in winter, in summer, and once blown open during a storm so hard that Pops blamed the wind for having a bad attitude. But it had never stared back with a brand new brass padlock and a laminated sign that said private property. No trespassing. I stood on Blue Heron Lane with a grocery bag in one hand and Pops' prescription envelope in the other. The bag held soup, crackers, and the peach candies he pretended were for his blood sugar because he had never respected medical advice unless it tasted like dessert. He was supposed to be home from rehab in 2 days after the fall that cracked his hip and bruised his pride. I had come to air out the place, wash his sheets, and make sure the furnace still worked. Instead, my key did nothing. The old gravel drive curved down through pines toward the water. From the road, I could see the roofline of the cabin, the dock, the covered boat lift, the wind chimes my mother hated, and the porch swing where Pops used to sit at dawn with black coffee and a fishing rod he rarely baited. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was inside. I called my sister first. That was the mistake people always make with family. We call the person most likely to hurt us because some younger part of us still expects an explanation instead of a performance. Answered on the second ring. "What are you doing at the lake?" she asked. Not hello, not how is Pops, not why do you sound like you are standing in the cold. "I'm at the gate," I said. "Why is there a padlock?" A soft sigh, her sympathy sigh, had several. The church sigh, the funeral sigh, the I'm the only one being reasonable sigh. This one was sharp enough to cut rope. "Sam, you can't just show up anymore." Anymore. The house situation changed. The soup bag dug into my fingers. What house situation? Behind me, tires hissed on wet pavement. A silver SUV slowed, then rolled to a stop. My sister's husband, Brad, lowered the passenger window. He wore sunglasses in November and had the relaxed face of a man who loved arriving after someone else had done the damage. "Sam," he said, "this isn't helpful." I looked at the phone, then at him. Was not at home. She was in the SUV. She stepped out wearing a cream coat, pearl earrings, and grief she had not earned. "Pop signed the lake house over to me," she said gently, loud enough for Brad to hear and soft enough to sound wounded. "He did not. He did before the fall." My mouth went dry. Pops loved that place more than any person loved property. He had built it with a bad back and stubborn hands after our grandmother died. He used to say the lake house belonged to anyone who arrived hungry and left honest. He would have burned it down before handing it to who once called the dock a liability with mosquitoes. Brad opened his door and stood beside her. "The deed is filed." "Show me." Eyes shone, no tears fell. She had always been careful with resources. "You're proving why Pops did it," she whispered. "You've been obsessed with the house since he got sick. I've been bringing him groceries. You've been hovering. Because he fell. Because you wanted access." The accusation landed with the accuracy of rehearsal. Brad stepped between us slightly. "You need to leave before this becomes trespassing." The word trespassing made my body go cold. My childhood was behind that gate. My father's ashes were scattered under the willow by the water. Pops' workshop smelled like cedar and outboard oil behind that gate. My name was carved into a dock post from when I was 12 and thought permanence could be made with a pocket knife. I looked past them at the roof, the smoke, the dock. Something small blinked red beneath the boat lift. At the time, I thought it was a reflection from the water. Later, I would learn Pops had been watching the dock long after everyone assumed old men stopped watching anything. I stood there long after they drove away, listening to the chain settle against the gate. The absurd thing was that I still had the grocery bag in my hand, soup for a man I could not reach, medicine for a man being protected from the person who knew when he needed refills. That was how cruelty worked in our family. It did not announce itself with shouting. It arrived with paperwork, a new lock, and someone telling you to calm down. Sent the deed to the family group chat at 6:14 that evening. She did not send it to me first. She sent it to everyone. Cousins I barely spoke to, my Aunt June who believed whoever typed the most confidently, Brad's mother who had joined the chat after Thanksgiving and never left, and 3 relatives who had not visited Pops since the last time he paid for barbecue. The message said, "This is painful, but I need transparency before Sam spreads more hurtful accusations." Then came the scanned deed. Grantor Arthur Pops, grantee Mercer. The lake property on Blue Heron Lane transferred for the sum of $1 and love and consideration. Pop's signature sat at the bottom in blue ink. It looked like his signature, the way a stranger wearing your father's coat looks like family from across a parking lot. The first curve was close. The last name slanted right. The P had the same stubborn loop, but Pops never lifted his pen between Arthur and, he said a man who broke his own name in half was not ready to sign anything worth keeping. This signature had a tiny break. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. My phone lit up with reactions. Aunt June, Sam, this is legal. Please don't make it ugly. Cousin Mark has been handling everything. Maybe respect Pop's choice. Brad's mother, some people reveal themselves when money is involved. Waited 14 minutes, just long enough to look reluctant, then sent another message. I didn't want to say this publicly, but Sam has been pressuring Pops for months. Pops was afraid he'd be manipulated after rehab. He asked me to protect the house. My hands began to shake. I typed, "She's lying." Then deleted it. Typed, "Pops would never sign this." Deleted that too. Every response looked emotional and had already framed emotion as guilt. I called Pops at the rehab center. The nurse said he was asleep. I asked if I could visit in the morning. She paused too long. "Let me check the approved list," she said. The words opened under me like a trapdoor. What approved list? Family contact permissions were updated today. By whom? Another pause. His medical representative. Pops doesn't have a medical representative besides me for appointments. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't discuss details over the phone. I drove there anyway." The night nurse at rehab was a tired woman named who recognized me from Pop's first week. Her face changed when I gave my name. Not hostile, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said, keeping her voice low. "You've been restricted to scheduled supervised visits." "Restricted by my sister." She looked at the computer instead of answering. Through the hallway window, I saw Pop's room. The television flickered blue against the wall. His walker stood beside the bed. On the bedside table sat the old red cap he wore when fishing. The cap was tilted toward the door as if it had been waiting for me. "Can you at least tell him I came?" I asked. His expression softened. "I can tell him." I walked back to the parking lot with the cold crawling through my jacket. My phone buzzed. "Please stop upsetting him. You are making this harder for everyone." Everyone, the favorite word of people who mean themselves. I sat in the truck until the windshield. Then I remembered something Pops told me after my divorce, when I had apologized for needing his couch at 43. People who lock doors too fast are scared of what's still inside. The deed was a door. The rehab restriction was another. I needed to find what she had left inside before she changed every lock. That night I printed the deed and placed it beside an old birthday card Pops had sent me years before. I compared every curve, every hesitation, every stubborn lean of the letters. The difference was tiny, but grief had trained my eyes on details. Pop's real signature had pressure in it, like the pen had argued with the paper. The deed's signature floated. It looked, not lived. And suddenly the house felt less like a memory and more like a crime scene. Called me the next morning before her shift ended. "I'm not supposed to do this," she said. That sentence has saved more families than policy ever will. She told me Pops had been restless after hearing I came. He had refused breakfast, called by my mother's name, and kept asking for his red tackle box. When asked why, he his bed rail and whispered one word. "Dog." Did he say anything else? I asked. Boat, she said, then camera. Then he got upset because he couldn't remember the order. My chest tightened. Pops had cameras everywhere, though never where anyone expected. Not expensive security systems. Old trail cams, fishing cams, motion-triggered wildlife cameras, whatever he found on sale and modified with tape, zip ties, and suspicion. He said lake people lied more than city people because water made them think evidence drifted away. The camera under the boat lift. I drove to Blue Heron Lane at noon and parked a quarter-mile away behind the abandoned bait shack. The lake house gate had a new chain and a small wireless camera mounted to a pine. Had learned caution quickly. She had not learned Pops. There was another way in. When we were kids, Pops cut a footpath from the county culvert through the woods to the shoreline. He called it the Snake Trail because my mother refused to use it after seeing one harmless garter snake and accusing the entire forest of conspiracy. The trail was overgrown now, but my boots remembered what my head did not. I pushed through blackberry canes, slipped once on wet leaves, and came out behind the old boathouse. The cabin looked different from that angle. The curtains had been changed. A real estate flyer sat on the porch table. 2 champagne glasses stood beside it. Was celebrating. The boat lift groaned softly in the wind. Pops' aluminium fishing boat hung above the water under a grey tarp. Beneath the lift beam, half hidden behind a coil of rope, was a small black camera no bigger than my fist. The red light blinked once. Alive! I climbed onto the dock, with my heart beating so hard I could hear it under the gulls. My hands found the camera mount. Pops had secured it with a rusted clamp and a zip tie threaded through a drilled bracket. He had also wrapped the memory card door with electrical tape, because he trusted tape more than most relatives. I pulled the card and replaced it with a blank one from my wallet. Pops had trained me well. Never leave an empty eye where a guilty person expects a blind spot. Footsteps sounded inside the cabin. I ducked behind the covered boat as the sliding door opened. Brad stepped onto the deck with his phone pressed to his ear. No, the old man can't unwind it if the deed is filed. Has medical control now. Sam is noisy, but he's broke. He can't fight a sale if we move fast. Sale. The word hit harder than deed. Brad paced toward the railing. Tell the developer we can show the shoreline Saturday. The family piece is handled. The family piece. I crouched in the cold shadow of Pop's boat and understood that the forged deed was Not's endgame. It was inventory. She was not taking the lake house because she loved it. She was taking it because someone else wanted the shore. I did not tell Ray about Brad's call right away. Part of me wanted to protect Pops from the humiliation of knowing how casually they discussed selling his shore, but protection had become the language used to cage him. So I wrote everything down instead: time, exact words, direction Brad faced, where stood in the window. I was learning that memory feels powerful until a lawyer asks for dates. Then memory needs bones. I watched the memory card in the back room of Miller's Hardware because the owner, Ray Miller, still believed in 2 things: fixing things yourself and minding your business until someone needed help. Ray had known Pops for 50 years. They argued about boat batteries, mayoral races, and whether modern screws were made of soft foreign nonsense. When I told him I needed to view footage without using my home computer, he locked the front door for lunch and pointed me toward the workbench. Don't tell me unless I need to know, he said. You need to know. He sighed. I was afraid of that. The first videos were ordinary: raccoons on the dock, wind moving the tarp, Brad carrying boxes from the cabin, taking selfies by the water with a smile too wide for someone protecting an elderly man's legacy. Then came the night of March 12. The footage was grainy, black and white, and angled from beneath the boat lift toward the dock table. The motion sensor clicked on at 10:43 p.m., appeared first, wrapped in a dark coat, hair tucked under a hat. Brad followed with a folder. A third woman came behind them carrying a notary stamp and a travel mug. Ray leaned closer. Is that Wilkes? He asked. Who? Notary. Her husband runs the marina fuel dock. On the video, Brad placed papers on the dock table and shined his phone light over the signature line. Said, do it like the birthday card. Brad muttered, I know. He bent over the paper. His hand moved slowly, carefully, copying a name that was not his. Arthur. The notary looked away at the lake. My stomach turned. After Brad finished, snatched the pen and signed something else. Wilkes stamped the document without asking a single question, then lifted her face toward the dark cabin window and laughed. He's going to hate Sam for this, she said. Brad asked, what if Sam proves it? Smile sharpened in the infrared light. He won't. I already told the family Sam was pushing Pops. By the time he screams fraud, he'll just look guilty. Ray swore under his breath. I did not move. I could not. There are moments when anger becomes too large for the body and simply stands behind your ribs, silent, waiting for instructions. The video ended when they walked back inside. There were 3 more clips from that night. Brad photographing the forged signature, placing the papers into a padded envelope. Wilkes accepting cash from Brad's jacket pocket. Ray everything to 2 flash drives, then a 3rd. Police, he asked. Attorney first, I said. If I go to police alone, we'll say I broke in and tampered with footage. Ray smart. I stared at the paused image of my sister leaning over the dock table, face lit by a phone she thought was the only witness. Pops used to sit at that same table cleaning fish with hands that never shook. He built that dock after a storm took the first one. Every plank had a story. Every screw had been placed by someone who assumed family would keep standing after wood. Had turned it into a signing desk for theft. Ray placed the flash drive in my hand. What are you going to do? I looked at the screen. For once, I did not want to shout. I'm going to let her invite everyone. Ray made coffee while the files, though neither of us drank it. The hardware store around us, old refrigerators, fluorescent lights, rain ticking at the back door, ordinary sounds, that made the footage worse. Evil, I realized, did not need thunder. It could happen under familiar dock light while frogs sang in the reeds and someone who knew your childhood and old man's name like a homework assignment. The invitation came 2 days later. Called it a family dinner, which was how I knew it was a trial. She rented the private room at Juniper House, the lakefront restaurant where Brad took clients he wanted to impress and relatives he wanted to corner. The message said Pops, care plan, and the lake house transition needed to be discussed calmly. She used the word transition because theft sounds cleaner when dressed like administration. I almost refused. Then Aunt June texted me privately. Please come and be peaceful. Is scared you'll make a scene. Was not scared I would make a scene. She was counting on it. So I wore a clean shirt, brought no printed evidence, and arrived 7 minutes late to make them wonder whether I had lost nerve. The room held 12 relatives, Brad's mother, a cousin's husband who sold insurance and loved legal opinions, and at the head of the table, as if she had inherited the right to sit there from monarchy. A stack of folders rested beside her water glass. Brad stood near the wall, pretending casual confidence. Every face turned toward me. Sam said softly, thank you for coming. I took the empty seat farthest from her. Wouldn't miss my own character assassination. Aunt June winced, lowered her eyes. This is what I mean. Brad cleared his throat. Maybe we should begin with facts. Facts, another word thieves enjoy borrowing. Passed out copies of the deed, the rehab contact restrictions, and a typed timeline called concerns regarding Sam's conduct. It listed my visits to Pops as unannounced pressure. It called my grocery runs financial access. It described my questions about the deed as escalating paranoia. I read every line, slowly. The room waited for me to explode. Instead, I folded the pages neatly and placed them beside my fork. Nice formatting, I said. Blinked. The insurance cousin spoke first. Sam, the deed is recorded. You need to accept that Pops made a decision. Did he? His voice trembled. He was tired of you treating him like a bank. Pops had paid my electric bill once after my divorce. Had borrowed $40,000 for a boutique that sold candles shaped like fruit and closed before Christmas. But memory is negotiable in families that reward volume. Brad's mother leaned forward. You should be ashamed of putting your sister through this while your grandfather recovers. My grandfather is being isolated from me. For his protection, said. From soup. A few people looked down. Good. Humor cracks certainty where please cannot. Opened another folder. We also need to discuss the future sale. There it was. Aunt June looked up sharply. Sale. Smiled with regret she had rehearsed in a mirror. Maintaining the property is expensive. Pops deserves the best rehab and long-term care. Selling may be the only responsible option. Who is buying? I asked. Brad answered too fast. No one yet. Lie. I leaned back. Then why did you tell a developer the family piece was handled? The room changed temperature. Brad's jaw tightened. His eyes sharpened. Are you spying on us now? She asked. No, I said, not now. She heard the gap in that answer. Her face went pale under the restaurant light. For the first time all night, she was the one who looked emotional. I stood before dessert. Finish your dinner, I told them. You'll want witnesses for the next part. On the drive home, I replayed every face at that table. Not just the others mattered too. The cousins who before checking, the aunt who for peace before asking for proof, the in-laws who enjoyed having a villain that was not theirs. A lie becomes dangerous when people treat doubt as disloyalty. Supplied the match, but the room had been full of dry wood. I saw Pops the next morning because decided rules written by liars deserved flexible interpretation. She scheduled me as a supervised visitor for 9:00 a.m., then supervised from the hallway while pretending to update charts. Pops sat in a recliner by the window wearing his red cap and a sweatshirt with a loon on it. He looked smaller than the man who taught me to split firewood, but his eyes still moved like they were measuring weather. Sammy, he said. I had not been called Sammy by anyone else in 30 years. Hearing it from him almost broke me. I sat beside him and took his hand. Hi, Pops. He squeezed once, weak but there. Says I'm greedy. His face crumpled, says many things. Did you sign the lake house to her? He looked toward the window. Outside, a maintenance man pushed a cart of towels through slush. Paper, Pops whispered. What paper? He his chest, then frowned. Words were hard for him since the fall, not because his mind was gone, but because pain medication and age had turned language into a drawer that stuck. Willow, he said. The willow at the lake. His eyes brightened. Your dad. My father's ashes were under that willow. Pops had planted it the spring after the funeral. He said a man should leave shade if he could not stay. What about the willow? Pop's fingers scratched at the blanket like he was digging. Tin. There's a tin by the willow. He closed his eyes, exhausted by the effort. Stepped in, he needs rest soon. 1 more minute. I leaned closer. Pops is trying to sell the lake house. His eyes snapped open. No. The word came clear enough that stopped pretending not to listen. She says you signed the deed. Pop's mouth worked. Anger brought color to his cheeks. Never, not hers, not yours, family place. I found the camera. For 1 second, the old man came back completely. His eyes focused on mine, sharp and proud. Good boy, he whispered. I laughed once through my throat closing. What's under the willow? Pops looked down at our hands. Truth, he said. After he fell asleep, walked me out through the side hall. Is he in danger? She asked. Yes. Then make noise. Noise makes me look unstable. She held the door open and looked back at the room where Pops slept. Then make organized noise. That afternoon, I drove to the lake by the snake trail again. The air smelled like wet pine and thawing mud. I waited until Brad and left in the SUV, then went to the willow at the shoreline. The ground was soft. My fingers found the edge of a flat stone hidden under leaves. Beneath, it was a rusted coffee tin wrapped in 2 freezer bags. Inside were 3 things: Pop's original will, a handwritten letter, and a small envelope labeled for Sam when they call him greedy. I sat under the willow, with my father's ashes beneath the roots and Pop's handwriting in my lap. The first line read, "If is waving paper, check the dock before you check her tears." The coffee tin smelled like damp earth and old metal. Pops had wrapped everything so carefully that I could almost see him doing it, muttering to himself, angry at his own shaking hands, but refusing to quit. That image hurt me more than the forged deed. He had been preparing for betrayal alone while I was still trying to keep the family polite. He had known kindness would not be enough. I was late learning that. Pop's letter was written before the fall. That hurt more than I expected. It meant he had seen the storm while I was still calling it weather. He had noticed the way asked about property taxes, the way Brad photographed the shoreline, the way developers' trucks slowed near the culvert. He had watched greed take off its shoes and make itself comfortable long before it reached for the deed. The letter was only 2 pages, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. Sami, if you found this, I am either dead, foggy, or outnumbered. Maybe all 3, knowing my luck. Do not make this about who loves me more. She loves what proves she won. That is not the same as loving a person. I am not leaving the lake house too. I am not leaving it to you to sell either. The place goes into the family trust for use by my and great, with no sale for 25 years unless every living beneficiary agrees in writing and the court approves. I know that sounds dramatic. Blame your grandmother. She married drama and called it me. If someone produces a deed saying otherwise, it is false. Check the boat lift camera. Check the shoreline backup in the bait freezer. Check the manila folder marked minnows in Ray's old storage room. Underestimates fishermen. We save everything. I do not know how much of myself will be left when this matters. Remember me as I was when I could still sharpen a knife straight, not as I am when they put words in my mouth. And Sam, do not confuse being called greedy with being one. Some people accuse you of the appetite they brought to the table. The second page listed names, attorney, a trust account number, the location of a backup drive, and a note that made me laugh through tears. Do not let June mediate. She thinks peace is when the loudest liar gets tired. I photographed everything, then the tin, and put it back under the stone. Evidence is strongest when thieves do not know the ground has started speaking. Ray let me into his storage room at sunset. The manila folder marked minnows held copies of the trust documents, property tax receipts, and a letter from confirming she had updated the estate plan 18 months earlier. Why didn't Pops tell me? I asked. Ray sorted through the folder with rough hands. Probably because he knew you'd try to fix your sister before fixing the problem. That was unfair. It was also true. I had spent years explaining cruelty as insecurity, grief, middle child syndrome, bad marriages, bad timing. I had translated her selfishness into pain until I forgot translation is not forgiveness. It is labor, and I had done too much unpaid labor for people who used my kindness as storage. Ray handed me another drive. Shoreline backup, he said. Pops left it in my freezer behind scared my grandson half to death. The backup contained a second angle from a camera near the fish cleaning station. It showed the dock table, the notary, Brad's hand, and's face when she said, "He's going to hate Sam for this." 2 cameras, 2 angles, 1 forged deed. Answered her phone at 8:11 p.m. She was not related to from another story. That detail amused me later when my life had room for amusement again. This had a voice like gravel and a legal assistant who sounded afraid of her in a healthy way. I told everything. When I finished, she said, "Do not confront your sister again. She's hosting a sale preview Saturday." A pause, then said, "Good, let her." Pops Ray. Suddenly, I was not alone. Just did not know it yet. I slept badly after reading it. Every dream returned me to the lake house, but the rooms rearranged themselves and every door opened onto the dock. In one dream was a child again, sitting on the porch steps with mud on her shoes, asking why Pops liked me better. I woke angry because dreams make everyone innocent for a moment. Morning corrected that. Childhood wounds may explain a hunger, they do not excuse stealing the table. Called it a shoreline preview instead of an open house, because open house sounded too honest. By Saturday, the lake house looked like a staged murder scene. The family photographs were gone. The quilt my grandmother made had been replaced by a beige throw. The porch swing was still there, but had added blue cushions and a little sign that said Lake Life. Pops would have thrown that sign into the water and charged the lake with littering. Cars lined Blue Heron Lane. Developers, a county assessor, 2 neighbors, 3 relatives who claimed they were only there to keep things calm, and Brad's brother carrying a drone case like he was documenting a royal wedding. I arrived with. She wore a black coat, flat shoes, and the expression of a woman who did not believe in wasting anger before invoices required it. Ray came behind us with a tackle cooler. Inside the cooler were flash drives, printed stills, copies of the trust, and sandwiches because Ray believed court-adjacent conflict required ham. Saw us from the deck. Her smile faltered, then returned brighter. Sam, I didn't realize you were invited. I'm family. That has not been clear lately. Handed her a card. I represent Samuel and Arthur's trust interests. Read the card, then looked at Brad. Brad walked over with a developer I recognized from the county record search. Price, owner of Price Shoreline Partners. He had teeth too white for a man who built near wetlands. Is there a problem? Asked. Yes, said. The property is not lawfully transferable. Laughed softly, this again. Her audience gathered without being asked. People love legal drama when they can pretend concern is the reason they are listening. Brad stepped forward. The deed is recorded. We have title counsel. Smiled, it was not a friendly event. Then your title counsel will enjoy the footage. That word did what shouting never could. It moved through the deck like a gust. His fingers tightened around her. Brad stopped blinking. What footage? Aunt June asked. Snapped, nothing. Sam has been stalking us. I looked at my aunt. Remember when she said I was pushing Pops? You were visiting a lot, June said weakly. I was bringing him groceries. His voice sharpened and pressuring him. Ray set the cooler on the deck table. Arthur asked me to store some things. Stared at him. You had no right. He had every right, said. Arthur created a trust restricting sale of this property. He also documented concern that a deed might be fabricated. Price took one step backward. Developers have excellent survival instincts. Brad's brother lowered his drone case slowly, removed a printed still from the folder and placed it on the table. It showed Brad hunched over the doc papers, pen in hand, Wilkes beside him. Aunt June covered her mouth, whispered, "That's not what it looks like." There it was, the anthem of the court. I almost spoke, touched my wrist once, wait. Brad looked at, you said the camera was dead. The sentence was quiet. It was also a confession. Turned on him with pure hatred. Shut up. Price raised both hands. My company is withdrawing interest pending clarification. Clarification, repeated, good word. And from the shoreline below, as if Pops himself had timed it, the boat lift camera blinked red in the afternoon sun. The best part was Knott's face. I am not proud of that, but I will be honest. For one hot second, watching her confidence fracture felt like justice. Then I saw Pop's porch behind her, stripped of its old blankets and jokes, staged for buyers who would never know where my father's ashes rested. The pleasure vanished. This was not a game I was winning. It was a burial we had interrupted before they finished digging. Wilkes broke before did. That surprised me. I thought Brad would collapse first because Brad's courage lived in rooms where stood beside him, but had a notary stamp, a marina job, a husband with a business license, and a face that went gray the moment said felony. We met her in Ray Miller's back office the Monday after the Shoreline preview. Arranged it, though she made it clear we were not offering immunity because she was not a prosecutor and did not hand out forgiveness like coupons. Arrived wearing no makeup and a raincoat to her throat. She kept looking at the door. I didn't know it was fake, she said before sitting down. Opened her notebook. Then why did you stamp it at 10:47 p.m. on a dock? His mouth trembled. Ray leaned against the shelves behind us, arms crossed. He had put the freezer between and the exit, which was both unnecessary and emotionally satisfying. Said Pops couldn't travel, said. She said he signed earlier and forgot one page. Brad was just tracing where the signature should be so the page matched. I know that sounds bad. It sounds criminal, said. Cried then, not loudly. Tears slipped down her cheeks, as if embarrassed to belong to her. Brad gave me $2,000. Ray muttered something about cheap souls. Did tell you Sam was pressuring Pops? Asked. Yes, she said if the deed didn't get recorded, Sam would put Pops in a facility and sell everything. I laughed once, it came out wrong. Looked at me, I'm sorry. No, you're afraid. She flinched, because truth is rude when it arrives without soft shoes. Slid a still photo across the table. This is you accepting cash. Wiped her face, I'll give a statement. Full statement. Yes, including who drafted the deed. Hesitated. There it was, another door. Who asked? Brad's boss. I frowned. Brad works for a property management firm. Not exactly. He has been doing side acquisition work for Price Shoreline Partners, finding undervalued lake parcels before zoning changes. Price. Spence stopped. Say that again. Did slower. The fraud was bigger than wanting the house. Brad had been scouting family properties for development. The county was considering a marina expansion grant. Blue Heron Lane would triple in value if shoreline commercial zoning passed. Knew enough to want money. Brad knew enough to want timing. Price knew enough to pretend he did not know either of them when cameras appeared. Greed, I was learning, rarely comes alone. It carpools. Gave the statement, recorded with consent. Ray made copies. I sat there feeling my anger settle into something and more useful. Before leaving, looked at me again. Is Pops okay? No, I said. Her face crumpled. Good. People who help steal from old men should have to picture the old man afterward. That evening, called. Had tried to remove Pops from and transfer him to a rehab center 2 counties away. Stalled by claiming paperwork errors. She knows this is turning, said. Can she move him? Not if someone challenges the medical authorization fast. I called. By midnight, she had filed an emergency petition. By morning, the court calendar had our family's name on it. And by noon, posted a photo of herself holding Pops, hand at rehab with the caption, protecting him from the people who only want his things. I stared at the photo until the screen. Then I saved it as evidence. After left, Ray took the chair she had used and carried it outside. When I asked what he was doing, he said he needed to let the dishonesty air off it. It was ridiculous, and still I understood. Certain conversations leave a residue. The hardware store felt after her confession as if every shelf now held not just tools, but the knowledge of what people will trade for an envelope of cash. The emergency hearing was held in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, which felt appropriate for a family being judged by documents. Wore navy, Brad wore a gray suit. Aunt June sat behind them with a tissue folded in both hands. I sat with Ray behind me in the hallway waiting to testify by phone if needed. Pops was not there. His doctor said the stress could damage his recovery. I was grateful and furious. Grateful he did not have to watch his granddaughter defend theft. Furious that the court needed him absent to protect him from his own blood. Judge looked like a woman who had heard every version of it was a misunderstanding and believed none before breakfast. Spoke first. She kept it clean. Contested deed, alleged forgery, isolation of vulnerable elder, attempted property sale, unauthorized medical restrictions, risk of removal from current rehab facility. She submitted the trust documents, Pop's letter, its preliminary statement, and still images from the boat lift footage. Attorney objected to almost everything. Judge let him tire himself. Then she looked at, did Mr. personally sign the deed in your presence? Lifted her chin, he authorized it. That was not my question. The room tightened. Brad stared at the table. Said Pops wanted me to handle the house. Again, not my question. Her attorney leaned in and whispered. His jaw hardened. Judge turned to. Do you have the video? Connected her laptop. The courtroom screen showed the doc at night. The timestamp glowed white. Appeared, then Brad, then. The audio was thin but clear enough. Do it like the birthday card. Brad bent over the paper. The judge watched without expression. Whence recorded voice said, he's going to hate Sam for this. Aunt June made a small wounded sound behind us. The video ended. Silence held the room. Attorney stood slowly. Your Honor, this is a complex family matter, and my client disputes the interpretation. Judge raised one hand. No. One syllable, beautiful. She issued temporary orders immediately. The deed transfer was frozen. No sale, listing, removal of contents, alteration of locks, or transfer of the property could occur. Its medical authority was suspended pending review. I was granted visitation rights. A neutral guardian ad was appointed for Pops. The court ordered preservation of all communications between Brad, Wilkes, and Price Shoreline Partners. Then the judge leaned forward. Mrs. Mercer, if any party attempts to move Arthur or interfere with evidence after this order, I will treat it as contempt with teeth. I liked her even more than. Outside the courtroom, Aunt June approached me. Her face looked smaller. Sam, she whispered, I didn't know. You didn't ask. She began to cry. I did not comfort her. Not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood comfort can become another job people assign to the person they doubted. Brad came out next. He looked at me with naked panic. Made it sound. Finish that sentence carefully, I said. He didn't. Walked past all of us without stopping. Her face was calm. That scared me more than if she had screamed, because calm meant she had not accepted defeat. She was planning the next lie. I had imagined court would feel clean because truth would finally have a microphone. It did not. It felt like handing your pain to strangers and hoping they sorted it correctly. Every objection made my stomach tighten. Every legal phrase flattened something human. But then the video played and language stopped protecting them. The screen did what my shaking voice could not. It made the lie sit still while everyone looked at it. Brad called me at 1:18 a.m. I did not answer. He called again, then a third time. When a man who helped forge your grandfather's deed calls after midnight, you let voicemail collect the evidence. His message lasted 4 minutes and 13 seconds. Sam, listen, is losing it. I don't know what she told you, but Price knew more than he's saying. She kept saying the trust wouldn't matter if the old man was declared incompetent before the challenge. I didn't understand all of it. I just signed where she told me no, that sounds bad. I mean, either signature, but she said Pops had agreed and the papers were delayed. God, I know how that sounds. There was breathing, then a door closing somewhere behind him. She has another folder. I saw your name on it. She's going to say you stole from Pops' account. She has bank statements highlighted. I think she moved money through the lake maintenance account and marked it as your reimbursements. I don't want to go to prison for her. Call me. I saved the voicemail 3 times. At breakfast, listened with a face that could have curdled milk. Your sister is escalating, she said. She's cornered. Cornered people are dangerous when they still believe the room belongs to them. We requested bank records the same day. Pops' lake maintenance account had been used for dock repairs, tax payments, utilities, and whatever mysterious hardware Pops bought at midnight from online stores that made my spam filter nervous. Had apparently found a new use for it, framing me. There were transfers labeled Sam reimbursement. Some matched things I had actually bought for Pops: groceries, prescriptions, a replacement heater. Others were fiction: $4,000 for Shoreline Consulting, $700 for equipment removal, $2,000 for care transport. Each had a note or invoice with my name in the memo field. The invoices were bad forgeries. That did not mean they were harmless. People believe clean layouts. Understood that. She knew a lie in a PDF feels more official than truth spoken through a shaking voice. Filed another motion. Detective, not the same from another tale, but apparently life enjoys repeating names. Opened a fraud investigation after Wilkes' statement landed on the prosecutor's desk. Meanwhile, posted again. I will never understand people who attack caregivers while secretly taking from the person they claim to love. No names, just enough poison for everyone to drink and decide it tasted like me. Comments poured in. Stay strong. Family can be awful. You did everything for Pops. I almost responded. Then Pops called. had helped him dial from the rehab phone. His voice was thin but clear. "Sammy, I'm here. Mad. Very good." I laughed despite everything. He breathed for a while. "Don't hate her for me." The word surprised me. "Pops. Hate is heavy. Carry truth instead." I closed my eyes. "She's hurting you. Truth hurts back better." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table listening to the refrigerator hum. Pops was right. Hate wanted me tired. Truth wanted me precise. So I made a timeline. Every visit, every restriction, every forged document, every transfer, every post, every time used concern as a weapon. By midnight, the lie had a map. And for the first time, I saw where it would end. Not quietly in a courtroom. Publicly, because had chosen public first. Making the timeline changed me. I had always thought of documentation as something cold people did because they lacked trust. Now I understood it as care for your future self. The man I would be in court, in family meetings, in sleepless mornings full of doubt, he needed me to leave him evidence. So I became meticulous, not because I stopped feeling, because I felt too much to rely on memory alone. I chose the church picnic for her final performance. I should have expected it. She loved crowds that came preloaded with moral language. The annual Lake Parish picnic drew half the county. Casseroles, folding chairs, raffle baskets, children with melted popsicles, and adults pretending not to gossip while standing in circles designed for gossip. Pops could not attend, but brought his red cap and placed it on the donation table beside a framed photo of him at the lake. Underneath, she printed a sign. "Support Pops Care Fund." My blood went cold. A care fund had found a way to turn being caught into fundraising. She stood beside the table accepting hugs, wearing a pale dress and a sorrowful smile. Brad was nowhere in sight. Aunt June hovered near the lemonade, looking like a woman who had realized peacekeeping and cowardice had shared a closet for years. I arrived with Ray and saw the sign and muttered, "She has instincts like a raccoon in a locked pantry." Spotted us, her face lit with wounded bravery. "Sam," she said loudly, "please don't do this here." Perfect. She had not even waited for me to speak. People turned. I looked at the donation jar. There were already checks inside. "What is this money for?" I asked. "Pop's care. His care is covered by insurance and his pension. That won't cover legal fees caused by your attacks." A murmur moved through the picnic. Picked up Pop's cap and held it against her chest. "I'm trying to protect him from stress, from exploitation, from people who show up with lawyers and cameras and try to rip apart everything he wanted." There it was. Cameras had become proof of my cruelty instead of hers. Leaned toward me. "You're cold." I had wanted to wait for court. I had wanted to be careful. But careful does not mean allowing someone to collect money under a false grief tent. I stepped onto the low wooden platform where the raffle prizes were displayed. "Pastor Reed," I said, "may I use the microphone?" The pastor looked then at me, then at, who had the expression of future subpoenas. He handed it over. Whispered, "Don't you dare." I faced the crowd. "My sister says I'm attacking Pops. She says I'm greedy. She says she's collecting money for his care. Before anyone gives another dollar, you deserve to know what the court saw." Moved toward the platform. Ray stepped into her path, holding a plate of coleslaw like a shield. Connected my phone to the small speaker used for announcements. The doc footage audio played across the picnic lawn. "Do it like the birthday card." Then the video stills appeared on the projector screen behind me, the one meant for raffle numbers. Brad forging Pop's name. Stamping the deed. Laughing. "He's going to hate Sam for this." People gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Brad's mother turned and walked straight to her car. Lunged for the speaker. His voice cut through the noise. "Touch it and make my afternoon." I stopped. Her perfect face cracked. "You had no right," she hissed. I looked at the donation jar beside Pop's cap. "You used his face to collect money after forging his name." The crowd went silent. For once, had nothing ready. The raffle tickets fluttered in the wind behind me like tiny paper witnesses. Later, people would say they were shocked by the care fund jar. I was not. Had always known how to turn sympathy into currency. What shocked me was how quickly people reached for their wallets before asking one question about Pop's actual needs. That is the danger of a good performance. It makes generosity feel urgent and skepticism feel cruel. She did not just steal money. She recruited kindness and made it work for her. Price tried to disappear, but rich men disappear differently from poor ones. Poor men change phone numbers. Rich men create distance through attorneys, statements, and the phrase "no direct knowledge." His lawyer sent a letter claiming Price Shoreline Partners had relied entirely on representations made by and Brad Mercer and had no awareness of any irregularity regarding title. Read the letter at Ray's hardware counter and laughed so hard a customer in plumbing turned around. No awareness, she said, the mating call of men who email too much. She subpoenaed everything. Emails, texts, draft purchase agreements, zoning notes, shoreline survey payments, and Brad's side consulting contract. Within a week, no direct knowledge became a 78-page packet showing he had asked Brad whether the old owner problem was emotionally manageable. Had replied from Brad's phone once, "Sam is the problem, Pops can be controlled." The words sat on the page without shame because documents are shameless. They simply exist and let humans do the trembling. Detective interviewed, then interviewed him again. The second time, remembered more. Funny how memory improves when conspiracy becomes a possibility. He claimed Brad said Pops had already agreed verbally and the deed was a family cleanup. He admitted offering Brad a finder's fee after sale. He denied knowing about the forgery. He denied instructing anyone to isolate Pops. He denied half the things his own assistant had put in calendar notes. Meanwhile, life began shedding supporters. Aunt June apologized in a 3-page email, which I read once and filed under late. Cousin Mark texted, "I should stayed out of it." Brad's mother deleted her comments. The church returned every care fund donation. Pastor Reed asked if Pops would like a visit. I told him to ask Pops, not me. The strangest apology came from his daughter. She was 22, away at college, and had been mostly silent through the whole mess. She called me on a Thursday evening. "Uncle Sam," she said, voice shaking, "Mom told me you were trying to get Pops declared incompetent so you could sell the lake house." "No, I know now." The pain in her voice softened something I had wanted to keep hard. "She used me too," said. "She asked me to write a statement about you being weird at Thanksgiving. I thought it was for court because you were dangerous." "What did you write?" "That you asked Pops if he took his medication twice." I almost laughed. That was the danger. She made it sound controlling. Of course she did. Could turn her into bondage if it helped her drive the story. Began crying. "Is Pops going to hate me?" "No." "Do you?" I looked out my kitchen window at nothing in particular. "No, but you need to tell the truth when asked." "I will." After we hung up, I sat with that unexpected mercy for a while. Had built her fraud out of many people's trust, but not everyone who carried her bricks had understood the house being built. Brad did enough, did more than he admitted. Had been a tool placed in a room where she could not see the blueprint. Justice would need to know the difference. Never did. His call stayed with me longer than his emails. A developer lying for profit was ugly but simple. A young woman realizing her mother had used her conscience as decoration was something else. It reminded me that betrayal spreads beyond its target. It contaminates the people asked to believe it, repeat it, defend it, and later live with having been useful to harm they did not fully understand. When the court allowed me back into the lake house, I did not go alone. Ray insisted louder. Aunt June asked to come, and I said no, which offended her until I explained I was not accepting emotional chaperones from people who had mistaken silence for balance. So it was me, Ray, and a court-appointed inventory clerk named Dennis who wore cargo pants and photographed everything with the seriousness of a man cataloging a museum after a flood. The padlock came off at 10:03 a.m. The house smelled wrong. Not dirty, was too image-conscious for dirt, It smelled staged, lemon cleaner over missing history. The family photo wall was bare except for pale rectangles where frames had hung. Pop's fishing trophies were gone. My grandmother's quilt was gone. The old radio on the kitchen shelf was gone. The cedar chest where Pops kept letters from my grandmother sat open and empty. Dennis photographed every absence. Ray opened the pantry and swore. "What?" I asked. He pointed to the back corner. The wall panel where Pops hid spare cash and emergency keys had been loose. "They knew some hiding places," Ray said. "Grew up here too." It came out sharper than I meant. The truth is, part of me kept forgetting she had memories here. Not good ones, maybe, not tender ones, but she had stood in this kitchen as a child, eaten Pop's pancakes, learned to swim off that dock, slept under the same roof when storms knocked out power. She did not steal from a stranger. That made it worse. In Pop's bedroom, we found boxes stacked by the door labeled donate, sell, trash. My mother's old watercolor of the lake sat in trash. I picked it up carefully. His face softened. "Take a breath." "I'm breathing." "No, you're storing murder in your jaw." Ray coughed to hide a laugh. In the office, Dennis found something useful, a receipt from a storage facility 3 towns over. Brad's name, Unit 14B paid in cash. His eyes sharpened. The warrant came 2 days later. Unit 14B held half of Pop's life. The quilt, the radio, the fishing trophies, family photos, boxes of tools, 2 antique lamps, my grandmother's china, and a plastic bin full of documents apparently planned to sort later. Among those documents were drafts of letters to the rehab center describing me as financially predatory, a printed social media plan in his handwriting, and 3 versions of a statement, supposedly from Pops, confirming the deed transfer. Each version got sadder and more dramatic. Version 3 included the line, "Sam never loved the lake like did." I stood in that storage unit holding the fake words she wanted to put in Pop's mouth. Ray said quietly, "You okay?" "No." "Good, means you still know what okay is." We recovered the belongings under court order. The photo wall went back up. The quilt returned to the couch. The radio returned to the shelf. The watercolor returned above the fireplace. But the house did not feel restored. It felt like a body after surgery, alive, stitched, aware of what had been cut. I sat on the porch at dusk and watched the boat lift camera blink. Pops had built the lake house to gather family, had taught it to testify. That night after the photo wall was restored, I stood in front of it with a box of bent nails I had found in Pop's workshop. He kept them because he said even failed nails proved someone tried to build something. I hated that thought and needed it too. The lake house was full of bent nails now, mistakes, repairs, evidence of force, but it was still standing. For the moment, so were we. The prosecutor offered a deal in exchange for testimony against Brad and, when told me, I felt betrayed by a system I had no right to expect tenderness from. Law is not revenge with stationery. It is negotiation wearing a robe. The offer was ugly but practical. Guilty plea to fraud-related charges, restitution, probation with possible confinement, cooperation regarding the development scheme, and a no-contact order protecting Pops. The more serious elder exploitation counts would remain depending on her cooperation. "She forged his deed," I said. "Brad's hand forged the signature," replied. "She orchestrated it." "Yes." "She isolated him." "Yes." "She tried to frame me." "Yes." Let each yes stand instead of softening the room with legal fog. Then why does she get choices? Because prosecutors like ladders. Is a rung to Brad, Brad is a rung to, and may connect to more than this property. I hated that explanation because it made sense. Pops took the news better than I did. He had moved from rehab to a supervised apartment near the lake for continued recovery. His body was weaker, but his mind came in bright stretches now, especially in the morning. When I told him about the plea offer, he sat by the window with his red cap in his lap. "Prison?" he asked. "Maybe some, maybe not enough." Enough, never enough. "No. Truth. She would have to tell it." He looked at the water, then take truth. "I want more." Of course. His honesty annoyed me. I wanted him furious in a way that matched the size of my own anger. Instead, he had become old enough to see anger as weather, real, dangerous, temporary. She stole your house, I said. No. I stared at him. He lifted one finger, tried. That single word changed the room. Tried. Had tried to steal the house, tried to isolate him, tried to turn me into the villain, tried to sell the shoreline, tried to make truth arrive too late. She had hurt us, she had changed us, she had not finished. Pops leaned back, exhausted by clarity. Don't give her completed words, he whispered. On the drive home, I thought about that. Had counted on narrative more than paperwork. She needed everyone to say she took it, she won, Sam was greedy, Pops agreed. She needed completed words, because completed words become history. We still had time to refuse them. Accepted the plea framework 3 days later, but not before attempting one more little knife. Through her attorney, she requested access to the lake house to retrieve personal items of sentimental value. Required a list. The list included the porch swing, the cedar chest, my grandmother's quilt, Pop's wedding ring, and the framed photograph of my father under the willow. His email response was 2 words. Absolutely not. I printed it and showed Pops. He laughed until he coughed. Good lawyer, he said. Terrifying lawyer. Same fishy. For the first time in months, we sat together and let silence be peaceful instead of threatened. Outside, geese moved across the water like they owned every reflection. Pops watched them and said, greedy birds. I smiled. Should we check their paperwork? He closed his eyes, still smiling. Always. I used to think justice meant seeing the guilty person lose everything they tried to steal. Now I understood justice also meant resisting the temptation to become organized around their punishment. Had already taken months of sleep, trust, and peace. I did not want her to take the rest of my life by becoming the only story I told. That realization did not make me kinder. It made me harder to own. This cooperation interview happened in a conference room with 2 prosecutors, detective, attorney, and a recording device in the center of the table. I was allowed to sit in the observation room behind glass. It felt too much like television and not enough like justice. Entered without jewelry, that was new. Her hair was pulled back. Her face looked bare, almost young, except for the bitterness around her mouth. She sat with her hands folded and did not look toward the glass. The prosecutor began gently. Tell us how the deed transfer came about. Inhaled. Pops always intended me to have the lake house. Her attorney touched her sleeve. The prosecutor looked at her for a long time. Mrs. Mercer's face tightened. Fine, she said. He didn't say it in writing. It went downhill from there. She told the truth, the way some people clean a wound with dirty water. She admitted enough to meet the plea terms, but tried to season every admission with self-pity. Brad pressured me. Sam was always hovering. Pops made me feel unwanted. The house was sitting there while everyone expected me to manage the emotional burden. I did not understand the legal consequences. At that, detective stopped writing. You understood enough to restrict Sam's visits. His mouth closed. You understood enough to solicit a notary at night. No answer. You understood enough to prepare accusations about Sam before he discovered the deed. Her eyes flicked to the glass, then away. She knew I was there. The prosecutor played a clip from the dock camera. He's going to hate Sam for this. Watched herself smile in black and white. For the first time, shame crossed her face, briefly, like a bird shadow over water. Then she said, I was angry. Sitting beside me, whispered, a confession for cowards. But did give up Brad. She described his side work for, the promised finder's fee, the fake maintenance transfers, the social media plan, the strategy to have Pops deemed incompetent if he resisted. She admitted she had hoped the sale would close before anyone could afford a court challenge. She admitted she used family shame because Sam would never publicly humiliate me back. There it was. Not because she thought she was right. Because she thought I was restrained. When the interview ended, asked to speak to me. Said no. I surprised both of us by saying, 1 minute. They brought her into a small side room, stayed beside me, looked smaller under fluorescent lights, but small is not the same as harmless. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. Yes, you did. You just thought far ended with you winning. Her eyes filled. You always had Pops. The old accusation, the oldest bruise in our family. Believed love was a pie and I had stolen the biggest slice by showing up. You had him too, I said. You just hated that he loved anyone without making them fight you for it. She flinched. Good. Do you hate me? She asked. I thought of Pops telling me not to carry hate. I thought of the doc, the deed, the care fund jar, the photo wall stripped bare. No, I said, I know you now, that's worse for you. Then I walked out, before she could turn my mercy into another room for herself. When I left that side room, did not speak for a full minute. Then she said, that was cleaner than I expected. I told her it did not feel clean. She said clean and necessary were rarely the same animal. I carried that home with me. Some boundaries feel cruel because they are built from materials we used to call love. But a door is not cruel for closing when someone keeps walking in with matches. Brad held out longer than everyone expected because Brad confused delay with strength. His attorney filed motions, challenged the camera footage, questioned chain of custody, blamed family dysfunction, blamed the county recorder, and at one point suggested Pops, old cameras might have inaccurate timestamps. Enjoyed that one. Ah yes, she said, the camera forged the deed. But Brad broke when Price cut him loose publicly. Price Shoreline Partners issued a statement expressing shock at the alleged actions of an independent consultant. Independent consultant was Brad. Alleged actions were the things had paid him to do carefully and quietly. Had at least lied with style. Lied like a man hiding under a desk and calling it architecture. Brad requested a meeting with the prosecutor the next day. His statement was cleaner than because panic had burned away decoration. He admitted promised him a percentage if he secured the property below market before zoning changes. He admitted new Pops was recovering and that family resistance had to be neutralized. He produced texts showing, recommended a lawyer who had drafted the deed template. He admitted forging Pop's signature. Then he said something that made me colder than the confession. Wanted Sam blamed because Pops might forgive her, but he would never forgive Sam if he believed Sam betrayed the lake. There it was, the emotional math of the crime. They had not merely stolen property. They had tried to destroy the bond that would have helped Pops survive the theft. When told me, I went to the lake house alone. Not inside, to the dock. The water was gray, rippling under a wind that smelled like rain. The boat lift camera had been removed as evidence, leaving an empty bracket on the beam. I touched the screw holes. Pops came down the path slowly with his walker, and Ray hovering behind him like a grumpy guardian angel. You're supposed to wait for help, I said. Ray is help, unpleasant help. Ray snorted. Pops looked at the empty camera mount. Good eye. Yes, better than family sometimes. I laughed softly. We stood there watching the lake. Ray gave us space by pretending to inspect a rope that did not need inspection. Brad said they wanted you to hate me, I told Pops. Pop's hand tightened on the walker. Didn't work. No. Could have. The honesty hurt. I looked at him. Would you have believed it? His eyes stayed on the water. On bad day, maybe, fear is a thief too. I did not know what to do with that. Part of me wanted certainty, grand declarations that love would have conquered any lie. Pops was too truthful for that. He added, but you came. Yes, truth came. Yes, then enough. It was not enough, but it was what we had. A heron lifted from the reeds and moved across the water with prehistoric grace. Pops watched it go. Looks like your Aunt June, he said. Graceful. Ray laughed so hard he scared the birds. For a minute, the lake house felt less like evidence and more like home. Not healed, but breathing. Pops did not ask whether Brad was sorry. That told me more than any speech. Old men know apologies can become another fishing lure, shiny, moving, hiding a hook. Instead, Pops asked whether Brad had named the people above him, When I said yes, Pops, and looked at the water. Then he finally caught something useful, he said. It was the closest thing to forgiveness Brad would ever get from that doc. Sentencing happened in pieces. Wilkes went first. She lost her notary commission, paid fines, received probation, and was ordered to cooperate fully. She cried through her statement and said she had trusted the wrong people. Judge told her trust did not explain a cash envelope on a dock at night. I wrote that sentence down. Brad went next. He pleaded guilty to forgery, fraud, and elder exploitation-related counts. His attorney described him as manipulated by his wife and pressured by a powerful developer. The judge listened, then played the clip of Brad copying Pop's name. Do it like the birthday card. Brad stared at the table. He received prison time, not as much as my anger wanted, more than his arrogance expected. Price's case took longer. White-collar men are often allowed to move slowly toward consequences, as if court must respect the schedule of people who own boats. But the texts, contracts, and Brad's testimony held. Faced charges tied to conspiracy and fraud. His company paid settlements before admitting anything publicly, which is how money apologizes without kneeling. Was last. Pops insisted on attending by video from his office instead of the courtroom. He wore his red cap and a clean flannel shirt. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. Stood before the judge and read from a paper. I harmed my family. I made choices out of resentment and fear. I allowed greed to guide me. I lied about my brother. I isolated Pops. I participated in a forged deed and tried to benefit from selling property that was not mine. It was the closest she had come to truth without trying to smuggle herself out the side door. Then she looked at the video screen. I'm sorry, Pops. Pops said nothing. The judge did not ask him to. When it was my turn for a victim statement, I had 5 pages prepared. I had written about the gate, the deed, the family dinner, the picnic, Pops, isolation, the way being called greedy by someone greedy can still poison the mirror. I only read 1 page. My sister did not simply try to steal a lake house. She tried to steal the trust that made the house matter. She used concern as a weapon, paperwork as costume, and family as cover. I am asking the court to remember that elder exploitation often speaks softly. It says it is helping. It says it is protecting. It says everyone else is unstable. That is why evidence matters. That is why old men deserve to be believed before their property is divided. My voice shook once. I let it. Judge sentenced to a combination of confinement, probation, restitution, and a permanent protective order barring her from controlling Pops, finances, medical decisions, or property. She also ordered a public correction filed with the county record. The forged deed would not merely be void. It would be marked false. Outside, Aunt June asked if we could start healing now. Answered before I could. Healing is not a group activity scheduled by the people who arrived late. Ray whispered, I want that on a shirt. Back at's office, Pops removed his red cap and placed it on the table. Done, he asked. Legally, mostly. He good enough for today. For once, I agreed. I kept expecting relief to arrive after the judge spoke, but relief is not a train that obeys schedules. It came later, in pieces, when I slept 6 hours without checking my phone, when Pops laughed at a bad weather report, when I drove past Blue Heron Lane and did not feel my pulse jump. Sentencing ended the case on paper. My body took longer to believe the danger had left the room. The family trust meeting took place at the lake house in early summer. Pops wanted it there. Objected because stairs, emotions, and relatives were each hazards on their own, but Pops said if everyone could gather there to steal it, they could gather there to protect it. Nobody had a good answer to that. We set chairs on the lawn under the willow. The family came quietly. Aunt June brought a casserole no one asked for. Cousin Mark kept apologizing until Ray told him apologies were like fishing casts. After 3 bad ones, stop throwing. Came to, daughter sat near the back, hands folded tightly, face pale. She had honestly. Pops had asked that she be included because children shouldn't inherit exile for telling truth late. The trust terms were read aloud. No sale for 25 years. Shared family use by schedule. Maintenance fund created from Pop's savings and later contributions. No single relative could claim occupancy. No commercial development. No transfer without court approval. Any attempt to isolate Pop's, falsify documents, or manipulate access resulted in automatic disqualification from trust management. Enjoyed reading that part. Pop's listened with his eyes closed. When finished, he opened them and looked around the lawn. "Anybody confused?" he asked. No one dared answer. "He good I am sometimes, you don't get to be." A few people laughed nervously. Pops did not. Then he pointed toward the dock. "That house isn't prize, it's work. You use it, you fix it. You break it, you say so. You love it. You don't sell it when old man turns his back." Aunt June cried. This time I believed some of it. After the meeting, approached me by the willow. "Can I visit him?" she asked. "Ask him." I did. He said ask Sam, because Sam knows where the snakes are. I smiled despite myself. The snake trail is real. "I know, Mom said you made it up to scare us. Your mother made up more profitable things." "Look down, I'm sorry." "You've said that. I'll keep saying it. Say it with behavior." I can do that." We walked to the dock together. The new camera bracket had been installed higher, with a better angle and cloud backup, because had become a security enthusiast against her will. Pops had insisted on a small sign beneath it. "Smile, Pops SAVES receipts." The lake glittered under sun. For the first time in months, the water looked like water instead of a witness stand. That evening, after everyone left, Pops and I sat on the porch swing. He held a glass of lemonade. I held coffee because I had inherited every bad habit except optimism. "Sammy," he said. "Yes. Thank you for not letting them make you mean." The sentence hit harder than any accusation had. I got close. Close is not a rival. We watched fireflies appear above the grass. The house still carried scars, so did we. But the locks were ours again. The photos were back on the wall. The willow held its ground. And somewhere above the dock, a tiny red light blinked into the dark. At dusk, helped Pops fold chairs while pretending he was not doing most of the supervising. I watched them from the porch and felt the strange ache of a future that would not be simple but might still be usable. Had tried to turn inheritance into ownership. Pops turned it into responsibility. That was his revenge, in the end, making the house impossible to possess without serving it. The boat camera caught the forged deed, but it did not catch everything. It did not catch the first time learned tears could end consequences. It did not catch me excusing her for decades because calling someone toxic feels when you remember their baby teeth. It did not catch Pops sitting alone after visits, wondering why the grandchild he loved kept asking about taxes instead of weather. It did not catch Aunt June choosing peace over truth, because peace let her finish dessert. It did not catch the small humiliations of being doubted, the pause in a nurse's voice, the silence in a family chat, the way relatives looked at my hands as if greed might be visible under my fingernails. Cameras catch actions, they do not catch erosion. That part we had to name ourselves. By autumn, Pops was living part-time at the lake house again with help. He moved slower, forgot more nouns, and once called the microwave a lightning cabinet, which Ray insisted was technically better branding. But Pops still knew the water. He knew the sound of geese lifting off before dawn. He knew where my father's willow bent toward the shore. He knew had done something unforgivable, though some days he forgot the order of it. On those days, I did not retell the whole story. I simply said, "The house is safe." He would nod. "Sammy safe. Mostly. Good." Wrote letters. I kept them in a shoebox unread until told me unread letters still take up space, so I read one. It began with "I hope one day you understand." I threw it away. Understanding had never been our shortage. Boundaries had. Visited Pops twice a month. She learned to clean fish badly, make coffee too weak, and sit with old stories without correcting the timeline. Sometimes grief skipped generations and arrived as responsibility. I let it. Aunt June became useful in small ways, rides to appointments, casseroles with less commentary, Silence when silence was the only appropriate dish. Cousin Mark fixed the porch steps and did not post about it. People can improve without deserving applause. The lake house remained in trust. No sale, no developer, no lake life sign. I kept Pop's letter under glass beside the old family photos. The line I read most was not about the deed or the cameras. It was the one near the end. Do not confuse being called greedy with being one. I needed that longer than I wanted to admit. One cold morning, Pops and I walked to the dock. The water was silver. The new camera blinked above us. He looked up and smiled. "Still watching?" he asked. "Always." He toward the lake. "Good, but don't let machines do all the remembering." So I remember. I remember the locked gate, the forged paper, the family dinner, the picnic, the courtroom. I remember Ray's freezer, his courage, his terrifying emails, shaking voice, Pops, hands squeezing mine when words were hard. I remember that truth did not arrive alone. We carried it in pieces until it was heavy enough to stand. And when people ask why an old boat camera still hangs over a quiet dock, I tell them the same thing Pops told me when I was young and thought family could never become dangerous. "Love your people," I say, "but keep records." Then I sit beside him on the porch, where the lake moves like nothing ever happened, and let the silence be ours instead of stolen. I still keep the first padlock put on the gate. It sits in a drawer beside Pop's letter and a copy of the voided deed, not because I want to remember pain forever, but because forgetting too neatly can become its own danger. Some objects deserve to survive as warnings. The lock reminds me that access is not love, paperwork is not truth, and family is not a reason to leave the gate unguarded.